Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. This episode I got to record with Joe, aka the Daddy Gamer, on YouTube, and he's also part of the Hexes Bows Podcast. And when we were recording this episode, Hexes Bows was on hiatus at the time. However, they are now back, and you can definitely go out and check out their latest episode on any of your favorite podcast apps, or you can just find it at hexesandbows.com. All of the links are going to be in the show notes, not only for Joe's YouTube and social media stuff, but also for the Hexes and Bows podcast and website as well. Also, as a note, is that we have finally started launching our Tales from the Five Nations actual play podcast. You can find it on any of your favorite podcast apps, and there will be links to that in the show notes as well. Tales from the Five Nations is an actual play podcast, but instead of using the traditional Dungeons & Dragons rules, we use a rule system called Savage Worlds, and we play in the Eberron campaign setting, which was a D&D setting and still is to an extent. They don't support it that much at this point, but hopefully this year or maybe next year Wizards will release some content for Eberron because it's an amazing setting. Anyway, thanks for taking a listen to this episode, and as always, we've got a short promo for a different podcast that follows this, and then we'll jump right into the podcast episode with Joe. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.
Hey there, we're Dungeons & Dragons. Quick, what do we do here?
We're going to roll some dice,
make some terrible jokes,
toss in a wacky inflatable arm flailing tube man, and you've got a party!
It's so much pun. Sorry about that.
Yeah. We're Dungeons & Dragons, a D&D 5th edition actual play podcast where we are building a world through the collaborative storytelling that is Dungeons & Dragons.
we like to have fun.
Laughs.
thrills, and adventure.
Join us by subscribing to Dungeons & Dragons through iTunes or wherever you download podcasts.
Find us at dumbdragons.com.
And welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am back again with a new guest. His name is Joe Siemsen. How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing pretty good. I walked all the way over here, thought I had forgotten something, walked all the way back home, realized that it was in my pocket the whole time, and then walked back. So, that's a good start.
I mean, it's better than me driving my kids all the way to school, them saying, oh, I forgot my backpack, driving the 20 minutes back to the house to get it, to drop it back off at their school, and then drive back home.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a bunch of fun when I don't do backpack checks in the morning. Like, does everyone have their backpack? Does everyone have their lunchbox? Does everyone have their water bottle? Okay, we're good to go.
See, it was your fault all along.
It was my fault all along, even though, we try to instill in them personal responsibility. Like, take care of your own stuff.
I feel like try is the key word.
Yes, try is definitely the key word. Try and repeat many times.
Yeah, we have a 3-year-old, and try is definitely the key word.
I remember when they were 3. That was not that long ago. Well, I guess 5 years ago. So
that's when they were. That's when they were fun.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're still okay now. They just talk back a lot and decide that they want to do things their way.
That sounds a lot like my 3-year-old.
I think it sounds like everybody at any age.
It's kind of funny. People are be like, "Oh, so the terrible twos, huh?" And I'm like, "Well, not for her. She's having a blast."
Yeah, our terrible twos didn't start until like 3s, and then it kind of got interesting with them. But
yeah, in some aspects, 3 is easier than 2. And in other aspects, 3 is harder than 2, because she goes to the bathroom now, but she now knows how to like manipulate scenarios so that she can get more help than she really needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like she suddenly out of nowhere is afraid of the dark, even when it's not dark. So she's like, "I want help." You don't need help.
That I just want you to know that doesn't change. Like my 9-year-old, when we get home at night, will refuse to go into the house, even though lights are on, because I'm not going in there with him at that point. I'm like, go in. There's lights on. You can see. No, I'm not going in without you.
He wants to make sure that if something happens outside, he's there to protect you.
Yes, that's it right there.
So
That is
next
it.
time he says that, you just be like, "Thanks, buddy. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be out here all alone by myself anyway."
Oh my goodness. Joe, I heard you on one of the podcasts that I listen to regularly called Hexes and Bows, but I'm glad to have you on right now to talk about some of your favorite fandoms that you're into.
Yes. Well, I mean, probably one of the bigger fandoms that I'm a part of is just tabletop gaming in general, which is a part of my, role as a host on the Hexes and Bows podcast. It's part of why Joey invited me, is because I've regularly talked about being, excited about tabletop gaming and playing tabletop RPGs and stuff. And he mentioned that he was making a podcast, and he had this big thing to fill out or whatever, and I filled it out, and I thought maybe he would invite me on as a guest occasionally, or maybe a reoccurring kind of thing. But it was a bit of a surprise to be invited on as an actual host. So I'm a part of the planning process and a part of of the regular thing that we do, which is pretty cool and a lot of fun. Actually, I learn a lot from the other hosts. They're wonderful, and particularly when we get excited and do research on different Kickstarters that we might be interested in backing, because we want people to learn about them. Even if a few people listen to us and they learn about a Kickstarter and they get excited about it and back it, that's what that section of the podcast is there for, is to really help promote some of these maybe more unknown projects, but also to just kind of geek out a little bit, like, oh, this would be so cool if this was a thing.
Yeah, totally. Like I think that's one of my favorite parts of the Hexes and Bows podcast is always listening to the Kickstarter section. I dig, and I get in trouble with listening to people talk about Kickstarters, or like I have friends that they'll kickstart something, I'll check it out. I'm like, ooh, for $10, I can get a PDF of something that seems really cool. Yeah. And it's downhill from there. And sometimes my bank account suffers when it's time to collect on that money.
There you go.
How did you get into tabletop gaming?
I think it's something I've been interested in for quite a while, but I played it once or twice in high school, but it got shut down. We basically had like a beginner kit, and that was about it. And after getting through that, we didn't know what else to do. And also people started getting really like worried about us, thinking that we were doing like witchcraft and stuff. So we shut it down just for the sake of drama, like to keep away from all the drama of it all. And we had other avenues of satisfying our, I guess, desire to play pretend. We just did it without the formal rules of rolling dice and having little minis. So instead, we ran around our yard, literally swinging sticks and swords around at each other, because apparently that's much better.
Yes, that is
a good
much
friend
better.
Of mine, I think, still has a scar on his chest from the time I nicked him with the tip of one of my swords. So,
ooh,
he thought it was awesome. I realized we were idiots.
It's safer to play the role playing games than play with stuff like that.
Yes, and we didn't do it as much after that. That's for sure.
What was your first tabletop game that you played, as far as like what you got into initially, or the one that really is the first one that you really just got invested in? So
one of my first career positions, one of my coworkers, him and I got along really well, and he invited me to join in their Dungeons and Dragons weekly campaign. And that was really when I started probably getting into it. I think we were playing 4.0, and they needed, I think I got invited because they needed an excuse to make a rogue, and they didn't have one. But I think they soon realized that I was a good addition to the team. I cared a lot about adding to the story and being a character within the world that our dungeon master was creating. And I think that in some ways helped the group also get into that mindset, because a few of the regular players are very min-maxy power gaming kind of mindset, and they realized, I think they realized a little bit that they can do that, but they can also like have fun building a story and building their characters alongside with that. It's not Dungeons and Dragons isn't just puzzles and combat simulation. It's storytelling, and you're not just simply playing through the levels of a video game, where it's just the challenge gets higher and higher the better and better you get. It's literally the stuff that happens in between those encounters that really progress why you're doing what you're doing, or maybe change what you're doing based off of new information.
Absolutely. So you first your first like really serious campaign was 4.0 D&D?
Yes.
Holy cow, that is an interesting addition to get into as far as Dungeons and Dragons goes. Just because I had gotten in like right at the tail end of second edition, and then when Wizards picked it up for third edition, and that was like my time, my like serious time was like 3 and 3.5. I played a heck of out of a lot of 4 with a group up in North Carolina, but that was like the edition where they went after like the MMO people to play tabletop games with, because of all the powers and how the powers work. Like, oh, you can use it once, you can use it every like encounter, or you can use it all the time. It's like, okay, so we've got cooldowns now, and we've got to make sure we plan out a strategy. And yeah, that was a very interesting addition.
Yeah, so that was kind of where I jumped in, and then next when 5e came out, we did that.
How do you like 5e, just out of curiosity? I haven't played it.
I think I like it a lot more as a cooperative storytelling game than previous editions. I think it lends itself to that. I think that even in character creation, it causes you to ask questions about your character that can help develop and motivate your character in situations. So it asks, what's your character's flaw as like a gameplay element? And so if you, for say, pick something like your dog or your character is afraid of canines, your character might be pretty useless in a fight against werewolves, kind of thing, because ideally you should role play that flaw into your character. And when you encounter that situation, your character's afraid, maybe depending on the DM, maybe they'll have you roll some sort of fear check or willpower check to fight against this lifelong fear your character has had. And I think those moments make it feel more like a story versus just, each character taking a turn to just whack bad guys.
Absolutely. And I think, because I was skimming through the 5e book, and I remember seeing like the backgrounds and that whole section of like, oh, what's like the character's drive or the fear, like you mentioned. And it's really interesting to see some of that stuff adapted into Dungeons and Dragons, when you'd find it in other like different games, like White Wolf used to have stuff like that. Or you'd find it in just other different games where it's like, okay, you've got to write down just this character stuff that's, it's part of the gameplay, but it really helps flesh out your character.
Yes. And I would say that my primary motivation in a lot of things is probably my real fandom is just storytelling. And tabletop role-playing is just my favorite form of it, because cooperative storytelling, I think, is just an amazing thing that no other medium can like really create. All throughout high school, when we didn't play Dungeons and Dragons, one of us, I don't know if they still exist, but one of us still has like a stack of old notebooks filled from the first page to the last page, where we passed that notebook around, and each had a character that was in this overall narrative, and we would write in what our character's doing in that moment.
That's
And
awesome.
then we would pass it on to the next person, and then they would add in what their character's doing. And we would, when we finally got the notebook around, we would see what everyone has done. We also did the same with, I think, MSN Messenger for a little bit more faster paced experience. But so the cooperative storytelling element has always been something I've been really fascinated with. And it wasn't until after college that I really had an opportunity to play tabletop role-playing games on a more serious and more regular level.
That's awesome. I love that notebook idea. I mean, what we used to do is do like we would game, but then someone would have like a forum up online, and we could do stuff where we could write about like, oh, what are characters doing, or backstory stuff, or fill in like, okay, the character's in town for a week, what are they doing? And you just get to fill it in. And that is always just so much fun for me as a writer, and getting to just write my character and just develop that character, and just made my characters just that much more better when it came time to get to the table.
That's really cool. That's a good idea for lulls. Like if you can't meet for a couple weeks, think about what, write up on this thing, what your character's been doing.
Oh yeah, there were times where, especially during college, we would be playing either like D&D or Star Wars, D20 Star Wars, or White Wolf, like vampire or werewolf or something along those lines, and we would write like 5, 6, 7 pages of character history and backstory, and include like NPCs that could show, that, hey, you can use these people if you need to show up in the game for whatever reason. And I wish I had those hard drives still that had like all of that stuff on it. Like just so much good stuff lost to the ether of the internet, or not even the internet, just old computers.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about like the things that you used to do, and how technology has changed how you do them, or the technology has been lost, so you can't even access, or it's just you got rid of it, and now you're thinking about it. Oh dang, that would have been good to have.
Yeah, I was cleaning up a box from, I don't know, we moved, and I was looking at the box. I was like, hey, look, a 3.5 floppy disk. I have nothing that could access a 3.5 floppy disk at this point.
Yeah, I think I had a short, like a short book or novel I was working on at one point, and it was on 3 or 4 floppy disks. I have no idea what happened to them.
They're just lost. Somebody's going to load them up one day and be like, look what I found.
They're probably in the garbage. I would be shocked if they're still around somewhere.
Oh my goodness. Now, are you still playing in a D&D campaign, or are you playing a different system at this point, or a different game at all?
So these days right now, I'm not. It's been a long time since I've really played in a campaign. I'm technically GMing one, but it's been on hiatus for a while now. With all with the various moves that I've been going through, and the fact that I'm 3 hours away from the rest of our players has made keeping it up difficult. But and that game is the Fantasy Flight Star Wars system, and so that's what I've been playing. If I get to choose a game to play, that's the one I would prefer to play.
Tell me about the Fantasy Flight game. I've heard a little bit about it, and I've spoken to Ross, who's from the Dice for Brains podcast, who also does a actual play of that Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight game. But I played it back in the day when Wizards had it, and it was, D20, so basically like Star Wars in space with, force powers and whatnot.
Yeah.
What's the draw to that Star Wars, or the draw obviously Star Wars, but what's like with Fantasy Flight, what have they done to just differentiate themselves, I guess, from normal like D20 or normal just tabletop games in general?
So I would say that the fact that they they have their own specialty dice, which can be a bit of a turnoff for some people because they're like, oh, great, now I have to learn these like unique symbols, or I have to buy specific dice just to play this game. But all you really need is one person to have a set of dice, and then you're good to go. You rarely need more dice than that. And everyone, once you learn how to make one dice roll, you know how to make every dice roll. They all are based off the exact same thing. It doesn't change according to what weapon, it doesn't change according to what your modifiers are or any sort of abilities. It's literally, you take, there's 2 sets of like character scores, and there's a longer list and a shorter list. The shorter list are your main like characteristics that you're like what you would consider like your charisma, your strength, dexterity, etc. And then there's your skills, which is what you would consider like I think at one point rope tying or something, or
Use
skills
rope.
use rope was one at one point in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
And things like athletics and skullduggery, those are on those lists. So you read, you find the 2 that coordinate with each other. You take the bigger number, and you grab that many green dice. You look at the smaller number, and you replace that number of green dice with upgraded yellow dice.
Okay.
And then the GM will tell you what the difficulty is, and that determines how many opposing die you roll with it. And it's literally just, if you have more successes than you have failures, you succeed in what you were trying to do. There isn't like a set, like it's very difficult for the GM to fully control how difficult something is, because I've seen some seemingly impossible rolls because I can't be like, oh, well, you have to beat, a 23 in order to succeed at this jump or whatever.
Right.
It's literally, that's going to be really difficult to jump, and you can attempt it if you want to. And they're like, well, I don't really have a choice. Or they can maybe come up with a way that they can get some bonus dice, a couple of extra D6s attached to their roll that might help them out. And so there's a lot of flexibility in the system. I've had some friends not like the game because they feel like it doesn't have enough rules, but I like it because it lends itself more. I think it has plenty of rules, and it just lends itself more to creative freedom for the players to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And another aspect I really love is storytelling is built into the dice rolls. So above just success and failure, there is advantage and threat.
Okay.
If you roll more advantage than threat, you have something good happen on top of succeeding in what you were doing. Or if you roll more threat than you have advantage, you have something a little bit bad happen on top of succeeding. So it's you can successfully hit your target and still have something a little bit bad happen. Like the battery pack in your blaster rifle goes out and you have to replace it in order to fire your gun again. Or when the stormtrooper you just shot down falls, his gun goes off, blasting the wall next to your face, and you take a setback die your next attack because you're slightly blinded. And there are a lot of moments where I was able to, where the dice roll itself encouraged better storytelling because it was above and beyond just success and failure. Something else happened. So I had a situation where they were talking to someone they had a good rapport with, and then they wanted to bargain. They succeeded in the bargaining, but had a massive amount of threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so they succeeded in bargaining, but that relationship with that NPC was permanently damaged.
Wow.
as a result. And I would not have come up with that had those dice not rolled like that. And what a great way for that to turn out. What an interesting way for it to end up being is because if they would have just succeeded in a lot of other systems, they would have simply just succeeded and that would have been the end of it. But no, they got what they wanted, but now they've lost this resource, an important resource in their campaign, because they got too eager, and the dice roll reflected that. And of course, there are on the upgraded die there's a third set of symbols called despair and triumph, and those are basically your critical hits or failures. And so you can succeed, have your threat or advantage, and then also have a triumph or a despair happen as well on top of it. And one thing I like about the triumph and despairs is they happen regardless of whether you success or fail. So you can roll a triumph and fail, but you still have that you still have something really, really good happen narratively that helps the team or the character get a little bit closer to what they were trying to do. And that can come in the form of giving another player bonus dice to roll or upgrading one of their die. It can be something narrative like that can benefit them, like something falls between them and their pursuers, allowing them to get further ahead of who's chasing them.
Okay. Now, who comes up with the threats or the advantages? Is it the players, or is it the storyteller? Is it like a combination of both?
I think it really depends on who's playing. So if I'm playing with a lot of new players, I tend to come up with it for them for a while. And then after we've been playing for a few hours, I'll start encouraging them to, okay, what would you like your advantage to be? Here's what you can do with it. And I start giving them options on what they would like to do. The campaign that I run, I typically handle all the threats and despairs, and they handle all of their own triumphs and advantages. So if at any time a player has a good suggestion, I'm open to it, and I think that really ties into my love of cooperative storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Is the dice encourages my players to think about like above and beyond just hitting their opponent. Okay, what can I do with this that narratively makes sense? And because you have to, it's encouraged in the game mechanics to come up with a reason why you use your advantage to give the next person attacking a bonus dice.
Mm-hmm.
And you come up with a reason as to why they get it. And then the GMs are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead and do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally different than, obviously like the D20, where it's like, okay, you either hit or you don't hit. And even with with the old White Wolf system, whereas the storyteller system and you use D10s, you still had to beat here's your target, and the more successes you got, the better you did, or the more damage you did, or the better you pull something off. So I guess it's similar to that, but it's cool that the dice really help flesh out the story instead of and it seems like, okay, you succeed or you succeed and it's forcing that, just adding extra stuff to the game, and that seems really fun.
Yes, I think that's the appeal for me. Is one, it's really a world I've always really enjoyed. I've always enjoyed Star Wars ever since I first watched it. I think it's a world that really appeals to a lot of new players too, who wouldn't be as into or as familiar with say a fantasy setting. They're like, what is all this magic and like specific spells and math happening? Like, what? Okay, a giant bug man? Are you serious? Like, however, with Star Wars, people know what the Force is. People know what a lightsaber is. People know what a blaster rifle is. They know these things. They recognize what they can imagine a stormtrooper.
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier than they can imagine a description of a walking, talking lizard man.
Right.
And I think that really lends itself to people being open to playing a tabletop role-playing game. Now, for some people, they just don't like Star Wars, and it doesn't matter. But I think that the system can be intimidating at first because the dice results have 3 layers to it. But like I said, it doesn't matter what you're rolling. You always take the bigger number, grab that many green dice. Then you look at the lower number associated the associated attribute, and then replace that many dice with yellow dice. And then there's beyond that, there's a couple of other things, but they're relatively easy to figure out. And then you roll it. And once you've learned that, you don't need to. It doesn't change based on your weapon. You don't roll to hit and then roll a different die to depending on what weapon you have to see how much damage it does.
Very cool. And do you run your Star Wars game? I know you're not running it currently just due to like distance from your players, but were you playing in a certain time period for Star Wars that you preferred, like, you know, original trilogy or prequel or something just future, like beyond the trilogy?
I don't know if I have a specific timeline. I just know that the the conflict between the rebels and the Empire is pretty hot right now, and my group is, you know, a morally ambiguous salvage crew. So when they got word of that the rebels had managed to take down a Star Destroyer that had crashed on planet, they of course then flew to that planet to try and salvage parts from it, along with some other things. A rival salvage crew that had threatened them and taken all their stuff at one point was also there, so they also wanted to get some revenge while they were at it. But, you know, when the Empire showed up to stop people from salvaging their technology and from salvaging their stuff, they had to figure out how to get out of there. That was a really fun encounter to run, was because there's 3 different factions all running around this massive, just destroyed Star Destroyer, trying to escape off planet and while also accomplishing their goal.
That's awesome. I was thinking like, oh man, that'd be pretty cool. Like just being a salvage, crew, just cleaning up after everyone else and selling things on the black market, and the savory and unsavory characters one might meet.
Yes, and that's the other thing I like about the Star Wars system is there's actually 3, like, I guess, games within it. Edge of the Empire is kind of your bounty hunters and your scoundrels and your smugglers and stuff. Age of Rebellion is the direct conflict, military-based conflict between the rebels and the Empire. And then Force and Destiny is your Force users and Jedi. And they all have slightly different rules, but they all work together. So if you're playing a more Force-based character, you're going to want to look at that book first in terms of some of your available options for character creation and things like that.
And are they all like individual books, or
yes.
Is it okay? So you do have to like kind of, if you're going to run something like across the spectrum, you're going to have to get the 3 books, but you
yes.
could run a game feasibly out of like the 1 book.
Yes, and another aspect I like is everything that you buy the book, it's a little bit more expensive than the Dungeons and Dragons books, but you only need 1. So for $60, you get your GM guide, you get your character creation, you get all the rules, and you even get a short introductory adventure to run right away. That's pre-written. You get options for all of the equipment that's readily available, and I think it just includes a lot of stuff. You look at how thick the book is, and it would take 3 or 4 Dungeons and Dragons manuals to like get that thick. And at that point, after buying that many Dungeons and Dragons manuals, you've spent far more than you would have on the one Star Wars book.
Absolutely. That was always the thing with D&D is just at least with 3.5 and even 4 is just the amount of books that were coming out, whether it was focusing on classes or monsters or more players' handbooks, and even the Star Wars Wizards of the Coast, where it was, Rebellion and New Jedi Order and just prequel stuff and ship information. Is just always extra books to buy. And
now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of modules available for these games, and I have a decent stack of those too, but I tend to try and get the ones that will be the most useful for me in telling better stories. So I have one that's committed to modifying and building equipment that players can use if they have an engineer or a mechanic that can do those things. They can look at and see what all these different options are for modifying their equipment and making it better. I have one that's just a bunch of locations. And one thing I like is pretty much every module adds more races and character classes. So you buy a book, you're getting more than just what they're saying, that you can use any race with any class across any of the books. The options for character creations are a little bit bonkers, actually, and I don't think I've ever enjoyed character creation as much as I do with Star Wars, because I can look at I can just be like, oh yeah, I want to be this, and I want to do this with it, and all of those options are available. Nothing really lends itself to being against that sort of build. And the way you can build a character and spend points early on can really help you change how a base alien species is anyway, and you can adjust, like, you spend points to adjust it and become better at what you are. And I think it's really good, because the more you have invested in a skill, that's what's better for your rolls and how much damage you deal, and has less to do with the equipment you have. Now, the equipment you have does change, like base damage and things like that, but it's not like someone with a dagger in Star Wars can do just as much damage with someone with a blaster pistol.
Oh, okay.
And it's based upon their skill level and not the weapon they have.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
I think the one exception is lightsabers, and that's just because it's a freaking lightsaber.
Awesome. Now, I just have to ask, do you have like a favorite race or a class in Star Wars?
I don't. I think that I've learned a lot more about the various races of Star Wars, and there's a lot that I would love to play if I could find someone to run the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say maybe one of those races would be the Ithorians.
Okay.
They're kind of the slug-looking guys. They're bipedal, but their heads are kind of flat, and they kind of come up, and they kind of look like a hammerhead shark type situation.
Yep.
But what the intriguing thing is, they have 2 sets of vocal cords and 2 mouths.
Mm-hmm.
So they can talk in stereo, and they're renowned singers. And their language is basically no one else in the universe can speak their language, because it does require both sets of vocal cords in order to speak it, because there's so many simultaneous noises coming out of each side that it's impossible for a person to speak that language. Now, in the Star Wars universe, it's basically implied everyone has these translators or can understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that big of a deal, really. And then, of course, in the rare situations, there's protocol droids and all sorts of stuff. available for players and for the characters of the Star Wars universe to use to understand each other. And I think another cool thing about the Ithorians is that they can speak with two voices at the same time, which lends to some really cool options. And I think they could do some really cool stuff if you made them a Force user.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that, magnify voice, and then use intimidation or something like that. And there's some really cool options that you could do with an Ithorian. There's a few others that have been really fun. There's a 4-armed bird man that's really fun to play around with because they get a bonus free action because of their extra set of arms.
Okay.
And they can in fact wield 4 weapons. It just massively increases the difficulty. So you declare that you're using that many weapons, and then it basically adds an extra 3 or 4 difficulty die to it. So unless you're really, really good in that, it's not really recommended because you're going to risk missing. Granted, if you hit, you're basically one-shotting even like tougher bosses.
Right.
That's a massive amount of damage to deal in one turn. It's basically 4 attacks at once.
That's cool. I mean, I remember like with the Wizards version, they had like 9 races, and then they would I think they released a race book where it's just all races, all the information on how to play each race and background and stuff. And just that's one of the things I love about Star Wars is there's just so many different races, and it's not like you can't just show them a picture. Like you actually can see them in the TV series or the movies, or just you're able to actually see how they act or and look and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, and I have so much fun with this system that basically anyone who's willing to listen, I kind of unload on them about how fun it is. And I have gotten a fair amount of people into playing tabletop games with it. And they've gone on to make their own stuff. And it's getting into tabletop role-playing has even inspired me to even get into some game design stuff and to expand my options. There's more than just D&D, and there's more than just reskins of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
There's systems that use incredible mechanics to create certain moods and to instill a specific emotion into the game itself based off the game mechanic. I don't know if you've played Dread ever.
I've heard of it.
It's a horror game that uses a Jenga tower instead of dice as a primary game mechanic. So if a player wants to perform an action, the GM will have them pull a certain number of pieces based off how difficult it is,
mm-hmm.
or based off the intensity of the moment to see if they succeed. And if the tower falls while they're trying to pull that piece, their character dies.
Oh, wow.
And that's basically the game. And the players have the option, if they don't think they can pull that piece, they can choose to knock the tower over and automatically succeed, sacrificing themselves.
Oh my goodness.
And I loved running. I recently ran my first game of it the other day, and it was a very easy game to run. I didn't have to do a whole lot to instill fear in my players because the Jenga tower did it for me.
Right.
As the tower got taller, the stakes were higher. And one of my players even said, he's like, I almost think I might enjoy watching this game more than I do playing this game. Because he had sacrificed himself at that point to succeed in what he wanted to do, to help the rest of them maybe survive what was happening. And he stuck around. He could have easily gone off to play video games in the living room or done something else, but he stuck around because he really wanted to see what happened. He wanted to see how the events would turn out. And I didn't have to do a whole lot to create fear in the game. The game did it for me. And afterwards I was like, what an incredible idea for a game. You like using a Jenga tower to tell stories. Incredible.
Yeah, that is awesome. I've heard other people talk about it too on different podcasts, and I think I've seen something, maybe a YouTube playthrough, or I know that
I think Tabletop by Geek and Sundry did play a game of it.
yeah, I think they did, because I remember watching it, and it's just the thought process of trying to decide if you want to, like, okay, I want to succeed for the rest of my party, but my character's going to die. Oh man, that'd be a tough one to come up against. Now, is Dread more of a game that you do it as like a one shot? Because with the character deaths being that high, like you obviously are going to knock the tower over at some point.
Yes. And one thing I did is I intended to do a one shot. So one thing I did was I, after each, as they started losing members of their crew, so they would have a short reprieve of where things would be easier, but everything was harder because there were fewer people. So I made the actions more difficult to perform because they didn't have as many people to help them or to do other things.
Right.
I'm like, oh, simple. Like, this is actually a fairly simple action, but you're surrounded by a pack of coyotes and you just watched your friend get mauled by them. You're going to have to pull 4 pieces right off the bat. Even though it's a brand new tower, they start the game pulling 4 pieces, and a couple of actions later, the tower is swaying again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it might have also helped that I put the Last of Us soundtrack on loop in the background, which is a horror game, and that soundtrack I think may have lended itself to it, because they would be pulling a piece and the music would be amping up, and I'd be like, yes, perfect timing. And at one point, one of my players said, "That dang music is freaking me out." But even for myself, I've been helping out with some friends of mine have created a game, and I've been bringing it to conventions, play testing it for them, offering my own bits of advice for the game, and getting involved in some of the gameplay mechanics and things like that. I'm applying our final art to templates to the various cards that we have in the game. And I don't think I would have gotten into that had I not been playing tabletop for the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been something like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll play your game. But I played their game and I was like, how can I help? I want to help you guys get this off the ground. If anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, I will definitely be promoting the game when the Kickstarter goes out. We're actually planning on bringing it to PAX Unplugged if we can. If we can get everything done and get a few printed like draft copies or test copies done. So if we can get everything set up to get a couple of test print copies done, we're planning on bringing the game to PAX Unplugged in November.
Very cool.
And the plan is to also have the Kickstarter go live about that time too, so that when people learn about it, they can immediately go and give us some money, I guess. Hopefully. I actually think we have a very reasonable goal, and I think it shouldn't be too difficult to achieve. I know some games have massive goals. Ours isn't. I think because our game is like 99. Our game is going to be like 99% done by the time it even goes to Kickstarter. Basically, our backers are going to be paying for print costs.
Okay.
Which I think is going to be, affordable for most people. Not any more than, going out and buying Boss Monster or Exploding Kittens. And it's along those. It's a quick party game. Basically, it takes about a half hour to get through.
Okay. Awesome. Well, when that gets set up, just send over the link, and I'll be happy to, promote it as much as I can.
Sweet.
Now,
I'm also working myself on my own rules light tabletop RPG.
mm-hmm.
And the main gameplay mechanic is using the word suggestion function on your phone.
Oh, really?
Yes. I don't know exactly how it comes together into a cooperative storytelling element, but the primary game mechanic in trying to accomplish what you want to get done is manipulating word suggestion to give you the tools that you need to get what you want to get done.
That's interesting. I'll be interested to see how you get that set up.
Yeah, I've got a page full of notes that I need to, mostly questions that I need to answer. I also need to have some time to sit down and really like hammer it out. But I did one of those like things on Facebook where you it like type in blah 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 and then hit word suggestion 20 times and see what you get. And I was thinking about, I did it, I came up with something wacky, and I was like, why couldn't this could be a game? I mean, it's very Mad Libs, but it could be a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think a lot of it's going to come down to is players have to choose, like, you either have to control or allow players to choose based off resources how many words they want to control.
Okay.
And how many words they're willing to let be chance based off the word suggestion. I don't know exactly how to balance it out, but I think I'm getting closer, and I think it's going to be very fun because these days most people's word suggestion is personalized.
Right, exactly.
So depending on who you play with, it could be very different each time. You could even do something where you swap phones with the person next to you.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
To see what happens.
Oh, awesome. And you're also one of the other things that you are currently doing is that you have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I have an entertainment-based gaming review channel, meaning that it's less about the review itself and my final thoughts on it, and more about just the kind of jokes and skits that I come up with that the content that I'm reviewing launches. So I would say that if you're expecting I always have a bit at the end where I talk somewhat seriously about the review, or about my actual thoughts on the game. But basically, 80% of it is just me riffing or making jokes about or talking about the game in a candid manner. And I would say that the other big thing about my channel is my 3-year-old daughter is my co-host, and she's in every single one of my videos. And I talk about how I specifically talk about in every review how being a father impacted the experience of playing the game or watching the movie that we are reviewing.
What's one of the biggest things that you found as far as like going from, before fatherhood to now as far as the video games and how you play them or what you're watching?
Mindful of I'm a lot more mindful of the content that I'm playing and when I'm playing it. The amount of time I have to play. And then I suppose the other big thing is that there are games that I've reviewed and I've played that my perspective on them would have been completely different before fatherhood. And we reviewed The Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And that game hit me very hard as a father because it's basically about fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the choices made in that game and the way that the story draws out, I basically just kind of sat there just emotionally drained as the credits rolled. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who plans on playing it, but I highly recommend it. The gameplay overall is very similar to Uncharted. It's the same developer, Naughty Dog, but it's much more stealth emphasis. And I do not like stealth-based games. I'm terrible at them, but the story was so good that I pushed through my dislike of stealth-based combat just to see what would happen next. It's that good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know before kids, it was like, oh, I have time to sit down and play a couple hours. And now it's like, okay, I need to wait to go to bed or wait for the kids to go to bed before I can even play a video game, because most of my video games are totally not appropriate for the kids to be watching. I mean, I did remember, I did try recently to play Final Fantasy X again. I was like, I'm really bored by this because it takes so long to get in between save points that I was bored, and my kids were like, can we just watch TV? Can we watch a movie? Can we do something else? I was like, yes, that's fine. I mean, maybe one day I'll play through Final Fantasy X again, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, we did a review of Final Fantasy IX, and that was, I think at the time my daughter was maybe a year. Yeah, maybe a year old. But the biggest thing was playing an RPG is very difficult with an infant, because, the next save point is a half hour away, and the last save point was an hour away, and all of a sudden you basically just have to leave the game going running while you go and take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. Feeding, diaper changes, and all that stuff. And I think in the end, I had by the end of recording footage for the review, I had recorded maybe like 3 hours worth of just save screen, or just not save screens, but pause screens.
Right.
So it was just like, there was I'd be shuffling through my footage, and I would just have to like skip ahead 20 minutes of just this pause screen just to get to where the game picked up again.
Yeah, I totally understand. Like, I was telling my wife, I said, I got the PlayStation 4. It came with like the entire Uncharted series. It came with the new Tomb Raider, like the Tomb Raider reboot. They're still in plastic wrap. I haven't even opened them up because between the kids being up until 8:30 at this point, and the subject matter, I'm not going to play a game where there's shooting or violence or stuff in front of them. And then after they go to bed, it's like, okay, it's like my wind down time with my wife. So we're doing our stuff together, like watching our shows together, watching a movie together. I'm like, man, I don't have time at all to play video games at this point until they get to be a better age where they're like more understanding of things and can maybe see some of that stuff.
Yeah. And I guess I'm somewhat lucky. My wife likes to go to bed early. So I tend to stay up later than the average person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I get a couple hours a day that I just am able to play or watch kind of whatever I want, which is nice.
Right.
And that's kind of my wind down time. I have a friend who deliberately wakes up at like 5 a.m. to give himself 2 hours of quiet time and time to himself.
That's cool. I don't know if I could get up at 5. I like sleeping.
But yeah, his wife all the time is like, "What? Why are you up? Why do you get up so early?" And he's like, "Because it's quiet. I can just sit down and watch a movie and not have someone interrupt me and make me pause it every time."
Absolutely. Now, for those people who are listening to this podcast and they want to check out your YouTube channel, where's the best place for them to go? Like to find you, either to follow you there or like follow you on social media?
There's Facebook.com/TheDaddyGamer. And then on Twitter, you can follow me at TheDaddyGamer. And then there's, if you search on YouTube, just Daddy Gamer, I'm typically one of the top 3 to show up. There's a couple of other similarly named YouTube channels, but I'm the only one that's a review-based channel.
Okay.
The others are gameplay-based channel.
Awesome. I will make sure to have the correct links to your YouTube channel, as well as all the the social media stuff on the show notes and on our Facebook page as well.
Yes, I'll be sure to give that to you, because we don't have a custom URL yet. We are at 95 subscribers, and it takes 100 to get a custom URL.
That is what I've heard. That's the big target number.
So close.
So
Close.
So I need the people that subscribe to this podcast just to go over and click subscribe so you can get that custom URL, please.
Where I hopefully will not be a huge disappointment. I hope that I earn your subscriber. I hope I earn you as a subscriber rather than just someone who's just like, sure, I'll do it for Tales.
Now I know Hexes and Bows is currently on hiatus. I've heard they're coming back soon.
I think we have a recording session tomorrow, Thursday, October 26th.
Awesome.
I also have an interview I did with someone at PAX West that I need to edit and put up as well.
Awesome. So if those people who are listening to this episode, hopefully Hexes and Bows is back by the time this episode comes out, and I'll have links to that podcast as well. And you can hear all about the awesome Kickstarter portion of the program, and then you guys just talk about gaming in general and what's going on in the world of gaming, right? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, basically we just kind of talk about, like, sometimes we'll have a topic related to gaming that we will bring up and talk about. Other times we talk about a game or something that happened in a game recently. Sometimes we just randomly go on a tangent about Overwatch for some reason. And so it's basically just for people who love gaming having a conversation about it. Sometimes there's more direction than other times. Hopefully it's usually entertaining. And we still have no idea how to end episodes, so those are always a mess, but
or start them sometimes.
That's true too. But as for Daddy Gamer, that was something that kind of was a big moment for me when I came up with the concept, because I had a list of things that I have a list of things that I want to do. And one of those things on that list was a gaming review channel, because I found that content on YouTube to be very appealing to myself, and I had the skills and the tools to do that myself, but I had one very important question tied to that particular thing I wanted to do. And that was, why should people watch me over the already well-established content creators?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why should someone watch me over Pro Jared or Space Hamster or Brutal Moose or Scarfulu or Dex the Swede? Why should people watch me over them who have been doing it for years already?
Right.
And I didn't have an answer to that question. I'm like, I don't have an answer as to why I would be better to watch, or why I don't have anything new to really bring to the table. And then I became a father, and about 4 months later, I realized that my perspective on gaming actually changed. How I played video games, the way I responded to video games, and the time I had for video games had all changed. And I thought to myself, this is an aspect to life and to gaming that people don't really talk about.
Mm-hmm.
This is my angle. And so I came up with the concept for Daddy Gamer. I was astounded that the channel didn't already exist and it was available to me. I think from the time I came up with the idea to the first episode was like 3 weeks.
Awesome.
And so I really hammered that first one out, and then things really slowed down. Basically, I get 2 or 3 episodes out a year at this point. I'm restructuring my schedule around it more, so it's becoming more of a priority because it is something I am serious about pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done some research. I've gone to forums and to Reddit pages of people just starting out on YouTube, and they talk about their statistics. I go visit their pages. We critique each other's work and things like that. And I'll go to a channel, and they'll have 45 videos, but each of those videos, and they'll have 10,000 views or something, but each of those videos only has so many views. And the only reason why they have that many views is because they have that many videos.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and they'll also have a fairly low subscriber count or something like that. Where I look at mine, and I've got, I just released episode 8 a week ago, and I'm sitting at 95 subscribers, and each of my videos, except for the newest one, or each of my main episodes, I should say, has over 100 views by itself. And that tells me that I'm doing something right. I have a lot of repeat viewers, and I'm getting I'm getting positive feedback on it. And I think that a lot of my frustration is just internal. Like, oh, this could be better. And hopefully that's good and continues to push me to improve my content, and to spend time on it, making it right. Like this last episode ended up being about twice as long as I originally planned it to be. And because I underestimated how long it took to fully go through and review a movie versus a game. Because a game, regardless of the game, tends to be, the gameplay wise, is pretty repetitive. So once you've established the gameplay, it won't change much throughout the game. And you can then go into a summary of the story fairly easy. With a movie, they spend, that's the only thing you have to talk about is the story. So unless you're willing to skip huge sections of the movie, you end up talking a lot about it. So it ended up taking a while. But I think more than anything else, the media that I absorb is YouTube based, and it is in that very niche genre of entertainment based video game reviews. So I get excited when I see a new Peanut Butter Gamer video released, or I tune in every Friday. I check every Friday for that new completionist episode. And I also enjoy things like Nostalgia Critic and a few others. They all inspire me, and I'll be in a funk, and I'll go and watch one of their newer videos or a video that just came out, and I'll be like, yes, I need to be in this as well. And I get very passionate about it, and it's for me a lot of fun, and I learn a lot about, through each of their reviews, regardless of how silly they get, I end up almost always learning something about a hobby that I'm passionate about. I learned something about a video game I'd never heard of before, or even learned things about games I had heard of before. I think my love for these content creators and has kind of driven me to want to do that as well. And hopefully I can get eventually to a similar level as them and make it if I could make that my job, that would be the best way to spend my time, because I could, especially the way that it's centered around being, playing games and reviewing things with my daughter. It puts me at home raising my daughter, spending a lot of time with my daughter, and creating this content with her. And it's something that I hope will continue throughout the future. And if at some point my daughter decides that she doesn't want to be a part of it anymore, I'll have to decide what to do at that point.
Right.
But so at this point, when I pull up the camera gear, she tends to get excited. And then we start recording, and then she gets really shy and uncooperative. So it's right now we're kind of fighting that. This latest episode took a while to get out the door, because it was like, I would say, are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to do this? And she'd nod and smile and say yes. I'm like, okay, well then, let's do this. And then we'd sit down and start recording, and she wouldn't want to do it anymore all of a sudden.
Right.
So it was kind of like, oh, okay. Do you want to try again later? And she'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, do you want to record? And she'd go, yeah. And she'd get excited and want to do it again. So I think the content will have to grow with her to keep her engaged. I can't do it the same way every time because she's going to be bored just doing it the way we have done it. So this next episode, I'm going to have to change things up a bit to make it more engaging for her, because I don't want her to dislike it. I want her to remember making videos with Dad fondly.
Exactly. Well, I think you gave the show or the links for Daddy Gamer already, but for anyone that's listening, I will make sure that they're on the show notes so people can check them out. And Joe, I just want to thank you for taking your time out. I know we had some scheduling issues for the first couple of times, but I'm glad that I was able to have you come on and do an episode with me.
I am flattered to have been invited. I know you found out about me through Hexes and Bows and through someone you kind of already know, but the fact that you, I guess, found me interesting enough to put me on your podcast is flattering. So thank you so much for having me on, and I hope that people listening found what I had to talk about interesting. And if for some reason me geeking out about Star Wars or a tabletop role-playing game, or if you want to learn more about the game that my friends are creating, and feel free to reach out to me on social media, and I will be excited to chat with you about it.
Awesome. Well, and like I said, when your stuff starts coming out, either through what you're working on yourself or with the other people, just send that stuff over and I'll be happy to promote it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.